It started with laughter, the kind that only families share after too many years apart. The table was set for celebration, glasses clinking, voices overlapping in joy. The air thick with the warmth of something that almost felt like love. My sister stood at the head of the table, her smile bright enough to outshine the flickering candles. She raised her hand, trembling with excitement, and announced her engagement. Applause erupted, but in that perfect moment I saw him. The man beside her, the one she called her future, looked at me with eyes that lingered a second too long. It wasn't affection. It was recognition, like something dangerous had just surfaced. I laughed it off, but my chest tightened. Maybe it was guilt, or maybe it was the beginning of something I never asked for. The next morning, sunlight spilled across my kitchen table as I scrolled through the photos from last night. Smiles, toasts, a perfect image of family joy. But every few frames, his face would appear, always near mine, always in focus. I told myself I was imagining things, that guilt was a trick of the mind. Still, something about his expression, that softness reserved for someone you shouldn't care about, made my stomach twist. When Claire texted, her message was all exclamation points and hearts. "Can you be my maid of honor?" I smiled at the screen, feeling a pang I couldn't explain. I typed, "Of course," then paused before hitting send. Somewhere deep inside, I knew I should have said no. A week later, I met Claire for coffee to talk about wedding plans. She was glowing, the kind of happiness that blinds you to everything else. She talked about venues, flowers, playlists, all with the breathless excitement of someone who believed love was simple. But then he walked in, Adam, carrying her forgotten scarf. When our eyes met, it was as if the whole cafe fell silent. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Claire beamed, introducing us properly, but something in his handshake lingered too long. A silent acknowledgement of a boundary already crossed, if only in thought. I smiled back, careful, polite, terrified that someone might see what I didn't want to admit. That night, I dreamed of the cafe again, only this time, Claire wasn't there. Just him, sitting across from me, saying things he never dared to say. I woke up ashamed, angry at myself, like I'd betrayed her just by imagining. I tried to shake it off, burying myself in work, in errands, in noise. But he kept showing up. Small things, harmless gestures, liking an old post, replying to a story, always at the edge of closeness. Each time I told myself, it meant nothing. Each time it felt a little less true. 2 weeks later, invitations arrived. A delicate white envelope sealed with gold, her handwriting looping across my name. To my sister, my heart, I stared at it for a long time before opening it. Inside, a single photograph slipped out, the engagement photo. They looked perfect. But I couldn't ignore what was right there in plain sight. His hand resting on her shoulder, yet his eyes looking just past her, looking at something else. Someone else. I tucked the photo away, trying not to think about how love can look beautiful from afar and feel like betrayal up close. The weeks passed in a blur of floral samples and dress fittings. I told myself it was normal, that every wedding came with a storm of emotions, but something about this one felt different. Whenever I saw Adam, there was a stillness, a kind of quiet awareness between us that neither of us dared to acknowledge. It was in the way his voice softened when he said my name, or how his eyes found me in a crowded room. One afternoon, while helping Claire choose table settings, I caught my reflection beside hers in the boutique mirror. Two sisters, almost identical smiles, but only one of us being loved the right way. The thought was fleeting, shameful, but it lingered like perfume long after I walked away. Later that week, I met my friend Julia for coffee. She was blunt, as always. "You know he looks at you, right?" she said, stirring her latte like it was nothing. I froze, pretending not to understand, but she wasn't smiling. "Everyone notices it, Em. It's weird." My throat tightened. I wanted to defend him, to say Julia was wrong, but the truth had already settled in my silence. For the first time, I saw the situation from the outside, how it must look, how it must feel to others. Guilt crawled under my skin like something alive. When I got home that night, I deleted every message, every picture, every trace of anything that might make me question myself again. I started avoiding family gatherings. Every group text went unanswered, every call left on silent. But avoidance doesn't erase truth. It only makes it louder. One night, as rain tapped against my window, I received a message from him. "You've been distant. Did I do something?" My hands trembled over the keyboard. I typed a dozen replies, then erased them all. Finally, I wrote just one word. No. It wasn't the truth, but it was the safest lie I could think of. His reply came seconds later. "Okay, just wanted to make sure you're okay." I stared at the screen for a long time, wishing I didn't care so much about someone I should never cared for at all. When Claire called me the next day, I almost didn't answer. Her voice was bright, almost forced. "I feel like you've been avoiding us," she said, her tone wrapped in sugar but laced with suspicion. I made up an excuse. Work, exhaustion, anything. She sighed softly. "I just want you close." "Adam says you've been distant." My stomach turned at the sound of his name from her lips. She continued, laughing nervously. "You two used to get along so well." I smiled through my lie, assuring her nothing was wrong. But when the call ended, I realized something had shifted. She had started to notice the cracks, too. At the next family dinner, everything felt off. Claire's smile was brittle, her laughter a little too loud. Adam was quieter than usual, his attention fixed on his plate. I sat between them, feeling like an intruder in my own family. When Claire asked me to pass the salt, her hand brushed mine, a small gesture, but her eyes didn't meet mine afterward. Something wordless passed between us, a silent understanding that we were both pretending. The night ended with polite goodbyes and forced hugs. As I walked to my car, I caught a glimpse of them through the window, Claire leaning into him, and him looking out at me. It happened 3 days later, a message from Claire. "We need to talk." Her tone was clipped, cold, unlike her usual warmth. When I arrived at her apartment, the air felt heavy. The wedding dress hung by the window, untouched, like a ghost waiting for its moment. She didn't offer coffee or a smile, just silence and a stare, sharp enough to draw blood. "Someone told me," she began, "that Adam looks at you differently." My chest tightened. I laughed weakly, trying to diffuse it, but her face didn't move. "Tell me I'm wrong," she said, voice cracking on the edge of rage and heartbreak. I did. I swore it. But even as I said it, I felt the lie tremble in my throat. The argument unfolded like thunder, quick, loud, unstoppable. She accused. I denied, and in between, there was Adam's name, over and over like a curse. Neither of us wanted to speak. She said she'd seen the way he looked at me, how he defended me too quickly, how his silence spoke louder than his promises. "You think I don't notice?" she shouted. "I see how he changes when you're around." I tried to hold myself together, tried to remind her I loved her, that I'd never betray her. But trust doesn't need proof to die. Only doubt. When I left, the door slammed behind me so hard, it echoed through my bones. That night, I sat in my car outside my apartment, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. My phone buzzed. Adam. I didn't answer. He called again. This time I let it ring, the sound filling the dark like an accusation. Then a message appeared. I didn't mean for this to happen. My breath caught. I stared at the words until they blurred, realizing he hadn't said what this meant. But we both knew. I deleted it immediately. But the words had already branded themselves in my mind. It wasn't love. It was something far more dangerous. Truth, dressed as temptation. The next day, the family gathered for brunch. Something meant to smooth the storm. But silence has a way of shouting louder than words. Claire barely looked at me. Adam sat beside her, expression neutral, but every now and then his gaze drifted toward me, quick and guilty. My mother filled the space with small talk. My father kept his eyes on his plate, and I sat there, pretending not to exist. The moment Claire's hand touched his, I felt the final fracture. Not jealousy, but grief. Grief for a family that used to be simple. Before love became a weapon none of us could hold without bleeding. The next morning the phone rang again. This time it wasn't him. It was my mother. Her voice trembled, calm but rehearsed. "Sweetheart," she said, "maybe it's best if you don't come to the wedding." Claire. She thinks it'll be easier for everyone. I didn't speak. I just listened to the quiet hum of the line, the sound of love turning into distance. "She needs space," my mother whispered, "just for now." When I hung up, I sat in silence, staring at the folded invitation still pinned to my fridge. For the first time, I realized it wasn't just a wedding I was losing. It was my sister. The week after the call felt like a void. My world shrank to the size of my apartment. 4 walls, 1 silence, and 1,000 thoughts I didn't want. Every sound outside felt intrusive. Every morning heavier than the last. I deleted the wedding date from my calendar, but the emptiness stayed, stubborn and cruel. My mother texted once, "She'll calm down soon," but I knew better. Claire's anger wasn't a storm that would pass. It was an earthquake that had already cracked the ground beneath us. Each night, I'd catch myself scrolling through her social media, the countdown to her wedding flashing like a wound I couldn't stop reopening. Days turned to weeks, and I started walking late at night just to feel the world move again. I passed wedding shops, couples laughing, strangers holding hands. Tiny reminders of everything I wasn't a part of. One evening, I saw a poster in a shop window. Hughes and Carter wedding, this Saturday. My stomach twisted. His name beside hers, printed so perfectly, felt like a cruel joke. I stood there longer than I should have, staring until my reflection blurred into theirs. Maybe I wanted to hate them both. Maybe I wanted to forget, but mostly, I just wanted to stop wondering what would have happened if none of this had ever started. That Friday on the eve of their wedding, I came home to a knock on the door. I almost didn't answer. But when I did, it was him, Adam. He looked wrecked, hair disheveled, eyes red, suit jacket clinging to him like he'd been running from something. "I needed to see you," he said. My heart froze. I wanted to slam the door, but I didn't. "Don't," I whispered, though I wasn't sure if I meant don't speak or don't stop. He stepped inside, and for a long time, we just stood there. 2 people who'd never meant to hurt anyone, but somehow had. "She knows," he finally said. "She knows everything." The words fell like ash. There was nothing left to say. We sat in silence for what felt like hours. He spoke softly, almost whispering. "It wasn't supposed to be this way," he said. "I thought marrying her would make it stop. What I felt for you." My chest ached at his words, my heart pounding with anger and pity all at once. "Don't," I said again, this time with strength. "You don't get to ruin her to ease your guilt." His eyes met mine, tears forming. "You think I don't know that?" he asked. "I ruined both of you?" I turned away before he could finish, because hearing it out loud made it too real. Love wasn't the villain here. cowardice was. When he finally left, dawn was breaking, a pale, fragile light creeping through the curtains. I watched him walk away, his figure fading into the early morning mist, and for the first time, I just felt empty. My phone buzzed an hour later. The wedding's off. No name, no explanation, just those 3 words. I didn't reply. I sat there as sunlight filled the room, thinking about everything that had collapsed in a single night. A wedding, a love, a family. And yet, somewhere beneath the ruin, there was a strange calm. Maybe sometimes destruction is the only way the truth can breathe. By noon, the entire town seemed to know. My phone buzzed nonstop. Messages from friends, relatives, even coworkers, all asking what happened. I didn't answer any of them. The silence outside felt thicker than words. When my mother called, I could hear the panic in her voice. "Claire's devastated," she said. "She's saying terrible things, Emily. She thinks you—" Her voice broke before she could finish. I wanted to defend myself, to scream that I hadn't asked for any of this, but what good would that do? The truth had already chosen its villain, and it was me. Sometimes innocence doesn't matter. Not when pain needs someone to blame. By evening, my mother showed up at my door, holding herself like she'd aged 10 years overnight. "I don't know what to believe," she whispered. "But she's hurting, Emily. And Adam, he's gone." I stepped aside to let her in. She wandered the apartment like she was searching for proof of something that wasn't there. "Did you love him?" she asked finally. Her question sliced through the quiet. I shook my head, but she didn't look convinced. "Then why do you look so heartbroken?" she said softly. I had no answer. Maybe because love wasn't the only thing that could break you. Sometimes it was simply being misunderstood. Claire's call came 2 days later. Her voice was hoarse, broken. "He told me everything," she said. "I didn't breathe. He said he was in love with you." The words felt unreal, like something from a nightmare. "You knew, didn't you?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You must have known." I tried to speak, to explain that I never wanted it, that I never encouraged it, but all that came out was, "I'm sorry." The line went silent. Then I heard it, the sound of her crying. Not the kind of cry that asks for comfort, but the kind that comes when something inside you dies for good. I realized then that no apology could fix what truth had destroyed. The confession spread fast, from whispers to full-blown gossip. By the end of the week, people stopped making eye contact with me in town. Even the cashier at the market offered a quiet, pitying smile. My father came by once, bringing groceries he didn't need to buy, trying to keep normalcy alive. "Your mother says Claire's gone to stay with friends," he said, eyes fixed on the floor. "She'll come around." But his voice lacked conviction. As he turned to leave, he paused by the door. "Emily," he said, "sometimes doing nothing still costs you everything." When the door shut, I stood in silence, realizing he was right. I saw Adam one last time, outside a small cafe, weeks later. He looked thinner, like someone who hadn't slept in days. He tried to smile when he saw me, but it faltered halfway. "I wanted to apologize," he said quietly. "Not for what I felt, but for what it did to you." I didn't know whether to be angry or grateful. "You ruined her," I said softly. "You ruined both of us," he nodded, eyes glistening. "I know." Then he walked away, disappearing into the crowd like a shadow dissolving at dawn. And for the first time, I didn't feel drawn to him. I just felt free. Sometimes closure doesn't come from forgiveness, but from finally feeling nothing at all. A month passed before I heard from Claire again. It came as a letter, no text, no call, just a folded piece of paper slipped under my door. The handwriting was familiar, but uneven, as if written through tears. I hesitated before opening it, Inside, her words cut deep. I always knew. Even before he met you, I knew he saw something in you that he never saw in me. My throat closed. She didn't accuse me this time. She confessed her own fear. I thought marrying him would fix it, she wrote. I thought if I could keep him close, I could make him forget you. I sat there for hours, the letter trembling in my hands, realizing that her anger had never really been about betrayal. It had been about losing a fight she was never meant to win. That night, I sat by the window, rereading the letter over and over. For the first time, I saw Claire not as my accuser, but as someone drowning long before I ever noticed the tide. I remembered how years ago she used to talk about Adam like he was her safe place, how she chased every hint of affection like it was proof she was enough. Maybe that's why she clung so hard, even when she knew it was already slipping away. I had spent so long defending myself that I never stopped to see her pain. The realization stung worse than any accusation. We were both victims, just in different ways. I went to see my mother the next morning. She looked older, tired in a way that had nothing to do with age. She told me she wrote you, she said, handing me a cup of tea. She said she didn't hate you anymore. That word, anymore, lingered in the air. My mother sighed. Claire said she's moving, somewhere quiet. I nodded, not trusting my voice. She said she needs to start over, my mother added, her eyes glistening. I realized then that we all did. Not just her. Sometimes the only way to heal a wound that deep is to stop trying to close it and just let it scar. Later that week, I visited the old park where Claire and I used to play as kids, the one with the broken swing and the oak tree that still bore our carved initials. The air smelled of rain and earth. For a moment, I could almost hear our laughter echoing through the years. I thought about how love had twisted us both into strangers, and how maybe the real betrayal wasn't Adam's or even mine, but Time's. Time had taken what was once pure and turned it into something we didn't recognize. Standing beneath that tree, I whispered, I forgive you. But what I really meant was, I forgive myself. Before I left, I tucked Claire's letter into the hollow of that tree, the same place we once hid our childhood secrets. Maybe it was foolish, but it felt right. As the wind brushed through the leaves, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Not at her, not at him, not even at fate. Sometimes life doesn't give you villains, just people trying their best with hearts that don't always listen. I walked away as the sky broke open, a soft drizzle following me home. And for the first time in months, I felt light. Not happy, not healed, just light enough to keep walking. 6 months later, the world different. Not better, just quieter. I had moved to a small coastal town where no one knew my name, where mornings smelled of salt and forgiveness. Life became simple again. Coffee at dawn, writing in a worn notebook, letting the waves drown out memories that still whispered when the wind changed. Sometimes I'd dream of her. Not the version who hated me, but the sister who used to braid my hair and make me laugh until I cried. I'd wake up with tears on my pillow, but not the kind that hurt. The kind that heal slowly, silently, like the tide washing over old footprints. One day, a small envelope arrived in the mail. No return address, just my name written in her familiar handwriting. Inside was a single photo. The two of us as kids, sitting on that same swing under the oak tree. On the back, a message. I hope you found peace. I'm trying to. I sat on the floor, staring at it for a long time, the sound of the ocean spilling through my open window. There was no anger left, no bitterness, only the quiet knowing that maybe this was our way of saying goodbye. Not to each other, but to the version of us that couldn't survive what love had broken. That evening, I walked to the cliffs by the water's edge, the place I now called my sanctuary. The waves crashed below, wild and endless, yet comforting in their rhythm. I thought about all that had happened, And for once, it didn't ache. It just felt distant. Pain, when it's lived in long enough, loses its sharpness. It becomes memory, gentle, almost kind. I whispered a thank you to the sea, to the sky, to whatever force had carried me through the wreckage. Because despite everything, I had survived. And survival, I realized, was its own quiet form of forgiveness. A few weeks later, my mother visited. She looked around my little home, smiling faintly. "It's beautiful here," she said. "You look different." We walked along the shore together, her arm linked in mine, speaking in half sentences and long pauses, the way families do when there's too much history between them. Before she left, she handed me a note. "From Claire," she said softly. It read, "You don't owe me forgiveness, but I hope someday we can remember each other kindly." I folded it carefully and tucked it inside my notebook. Maybe we would never be close again, but we were no longer broken. Just changed. Sometimes, when the wind shifts just right, I can almost hear her laughter again. Faint, like an echo from another life. And maybe that's enough. Not every story ends with forgiveness, or closure, or reunion. Some just end with acceptance, with learning to love the silence that follows the storm. I don't hate Adam anymore. I don't hate her. I just wish we'd all been braver with the truth. As I watched the sun dip beneath the water, painting the world in fire and gold, I whisper to the sea, "We were only human." And for the first time, it feels like peace. Real peace. The kind that doesn't need to be spoken.